Afternoon, Prof.
Okay, this one as well. Try and just more. This one is a little bit. What do you like? I think so. I'm so small. You wanted to tilt or no, just the whole thing. Just towards me. Yeah. Hello, hello. How are you doing? How are you now? More towards me. I think that was the height. It's like, are you able to bring it down there?
Yes, I should be.
Go down, go down. Go down again, go down again, go down, go down, and really fly out. Just go back. That's fine. Okay, thank you. Okay, it's can everyone hear me? Can Reesha, can you hear me?
Yes, Prof, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. So we're going to start now. It's a minute past our time. So let me here in person. Just give me a second. Is Ola online?
Yes, I think she is.
Can you hear us? Hello. What are you speakers?
I think she may have lost connection. Let me just try to get a hold of her. Prof.
Well, as you can hear us, just I can hear someone is trying to talk. Can you type Ola and just say that you're online and maybe it's your audio that's not working? Where is that going? I see she did send us a presentation at 1:30. Reesha, can you try and call her and hear and be if you can get hold of her?
Yes, Prof, I'm calling her now. I also just spoke to her over the phone. I'm not sure what happened now. I'm phoning her right now.
Hello.
Oh, fantastic! Great. Okay, is that Ola?
Yes, sorry, I don't know why I was sent out of the group.
Oh,
Back
okay.
now.
So you were you
Hello.
hello, we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I was kicked out. I'm back.
Oh, perfect. Glad to hear that you are back. Fantastic. You are just in on time. So this is Freedom Month. You know, we're celebrating our Freedom Day this month. And as we all know that freedom, political freedom, you know, freedom is not only political, it's also economic freedom. As the youth always remind us that freedom is also about economics. And also as Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen is an Indian philosopher. About 21 years ago, he was sitting in this seminar. And may God bless his soul, he also reminded us that, you know, freedom is about being capable, capabilities. What is it that you're able to do with the freedom that you have? So I'd like to say thank you so much to Dr. Ola and Dr. Reesha for preparing this presentation for us through their study that is titled Women's Inclusion in Agriculture, an Analysis of Relevant South African Policies. I'm not going to say a lot about their discussion, but I think I need to just introduce them. I need to just introduce them in terms of where they come from. They both did this study together, and Dr. Olayinka Adeniyi is a researcher at the ISER here at Rhodes. She holds a Doctor of Laws from the University of Pretoria. And I have to say, I'm glad that she is actually a friend of my former colleague at UNISA, who introduced us a few years ago. She's got a specialization in human rights law. Her scholarly work focuses on the rights and protection of women, children, and other vulnerable groups, with a strong emphasis on gender equality, social justice, and inclusive development. Ola has contributed to a range of interdisciplinary research projects and has published in several peer-reviewed academic journals. Her work engages with both theoretical and policy-oriented dimensions of human rights. And she is particularly passionate about using research as a tool to influence legal, social reforms across the continent. She continues to collaborate with national and international partners to advance evidence-based advocacy and transformative policy solutions. So, I mean, she's got quite an impressive CV, and she's going to be taking us through some of the work. And she's done this work with Dr. Reesha Kara. Dr. Kara is a researcher also at the ISER. We're very glad to have these great people with us, and much of her research is focused on human and economic development with interests in single motherhood, socioeconomic well-being, gender relations, poverty, social issues concerning everyday South Africans. Specifically, Reesha has years of experience in training in quantitative research methodology, as some of our students would attest, because they're going through that training at the moment. Her training methodology focusing on analysis of nationally representative survey data. Many of her research projects have been developed around the use of social statistics to understand social and economic phenomena. So, really should be very interesting to hear from two people coming from two different areas, one coming in social justice, in law, and another one coming mainly from a quantitative analysis to figure out today the impacts of how these South African policies, whether or not they've had an impact on the inclusion of women in agriculture. So I don't know, I think I can stop presenting your slide, Ola, so that you can take it on from your side. Is that okay? So that you can present your own slides, or one of you, Reesha, maybe you can present. I'm going to stop sharing from my side. Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine, Prof. Ola and I have discussed. She will present the slides from her end, and when I'm presenting, she will just change it for me. Ola, you can share your slides, please.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof.
So for the audience in the room, the minute you start sharing, I'm going to project your slides. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I guess it's still not too late to wish us Happy Freedom's Day.
Okay.
So this paper is an unpublished work by myself and Dr. Reesha. And we'll be presenting on women's inclusion in agriculture, but we'll be focusing on the analysis of relevant South African policies. So for today, the content of this presentation will be introduction. We'll be talking about the objectives and the research questions. We'll be discussing the methodology that we assessed in putting up the paper. We'll be analyzing relevant existing legal framework and policies, and only the relevant ones, not all the legal framework and policies that exist on agriculture or gender. We'll be discussing the results of the analysis of the frameworks and policies, and we'll be doing quantitative findings from the data. And then we'll be contextualizing the quantitative findings, then making recommendations for legal reform and policies, and then we'll conclude. Sorry, I have a cold, so I'm breathing through my nose. I don't know if that is affecting how I'm talking.
No,
Sorry
you
about that.
sound great, Ola. Ola, if I can ask you to please put it in presentation mode, if that's possible.
Okay.
If all of you see that 59%, see the
Is it this?
percent in
Yes,
the negative, you
perfect.
can
Thank you.
there at the bottom. Fantastic.
This?
Yeah. Got it.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So some aspects of the presentation would be presented by me, and then the ones that Dr. Reesha focused on, she would do the presentation. So I would
Okay, we've lost you on our side. Is it just me or is it everyone? Reesha, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you, Prof. I'm not sure. Ola, is everything okay?
Yes, everything is okay. I'm trying to go to the introduction.
Okay,
Okay.
fantastic. If it's too difficult, you can leave it in this mode. When you want to navigate to the next slide, there's a down arrow on your keyboard. You can press that down arrow. If you want to go up, and the up arrow, okay? Like on your right-hand side at the bottom, on your right-hand side at the bottom, there are 4 arrows. You can use the up and down to navigate between the slides that you want. But if it's too complicated, you can just present it the way that you want to, okay?
It's okay, Prof. Thank you. So in introducing the presentation, I would like to talk about how the idea for the paper was concepted. I think this idea came up when we were doing the project for the mobile cattle, grass-fed cattle auction in Matatele. And then we needed to gather some data through information questionnaires they were giving to people in Matatele. I think generally we got up some information that women actually engage in the grass-fed cattle agriculture, and they do that as owners, maybe probably from what they inherited from their families or as widows from their husbands. And then they actually engage in the feeding and the taking care of the cattle. But when it comes to the sale, they do not appear as owners or sellers at the auction, they send people. Women would only appear like when they want to sell animal feed or some refreshments at the auction. And that got me thinking that why would this be so? Although at the end of the day, the questions came up that probably they were restricted by the issue of undeveloped or underdeveloped infrastructures like transportation or zoos and difficulties. But then that was how the idea came up. So after the gathering of the data, I thought it would be good to put something up, especially in researching women's engagement, particularly in agriculture generally in South Africa. And so when Prof came up with the idea of us researchers putting up papers, I discussed with Dr. Reesha, and we decided to put this up. Talking about the status quo of women in agriculture in South Africa, I would want to say that it's not something quite different from some other part of Africa, from assumptions that women actually engage in agriculture on the home front for feeding families and basic feeding like that, but not generally in agriculture business. And I say assumptions because the field or the sector is believed to be majorly men or male dominated, just like the areas of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But that does not exclude the fact that we do find some women engaging in this, only that they are fewer than men. And I think that is the present status quo in South Africa presently. In the recent times, some laws and policies have come up to engage women's inclusion in this sector. And that is why we need to check the impact of this legal framework. Because I think from my background, there is the belief that legal framework actually sets the background or the scenes for the enjoyment of rights of individuals and their participation in society. And so it will be needful for us to check if there are legal framework policies that are women inclusive in the agricultural sector in South Africa or not. This is also because South Africa boasts as one of the most developed or developing or gender-friendly legal framework owners in Africa. When it comes to human rights, when it comes to policies, when it comes to law, it's a big country when we come to this discourse. Most of the discussions on human rights and law and policies, you'll always find South Africa at the forefront, especially when it has to do with gender-related issues. So South Africa seems to be like a country that we should research the impact of these boasts or this boasting when it comes to the area of women's inclusion in agriculture. So, and then we also need to check whether the laws and the policies are actually women empowering or inclusive in their provisions. And like I said earlier, we'd only be looking at the relevant legal framework and policies, not all of them. So we'll be looking at the Constitution, we'll be looking at some relevant equality or non-discriminative policies, some land policies, some gender policies, and if any, some agricultural policies. So the objectives of the research was to provide an overview of the extent to which legal framework or agricultural policies in South Africa are women or gender inclusive. We also sought to examine the existing relevant gender-related human rights provisions, agricultural legislations and policies, because we wanted to identify and highlight the legal implications or the legal background for women's participation in agriculture. The research sought to explore possible challenges of the implementation of the existing laws. We wanted to check what really, if the legal provisions actually exist, what are the challenges for their implementation or their enforcement. So we wanted to ascertain the extent of the implementation of the policies. And then we check from the analysis to triangulate this with the data that we have received from the Matatiele research project. Lastly, we want to draw from the findings to bring up recommendations on how to improve women's participation in subsistence agriculture, specifically with regards to grass-fed cattle farming in South Africa.
Okay.
So the
You
research
have to use
questions
that.
are, sorry, am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
So the research questions are basically, what is the status of women participation in agriculture in South Africa? And these we think we were able to get this from the data that we were able to get from the Matatiele project, although that was basically on the topic of the grass-fed cattle in South Africa. So the second research question is, what are the current legal frameworks and policies that are connected to women's participation in agriculture in South Africa? We want to know the current legal frameworks and policies that relate to women's participation in agriculture in South Africa. And lastly, the research question that is pertinent is, does the legal framework support or hinder women's participation or opportunities in agriculture? And how, if it does, how does it do so? Because we have said that the legal framework are supposed to provide a platform or the background or set the scene for participation of individuals in societies and the enjoyment or the realization of their rights. So we wanted to check if this legal framework would do that, if they actually do that or not in the area of agriculture in South Africa. Reesha?
Yes, thank you so much, Ola, for painting that picture for us. So now I'm going to talk about the methodology that we employed in the study. So I think essentially this is a mixed method study where we used various qualitative and quantitative data sources. The first and main data source, as Ola has been laboring on, are the specific legal frameworks and relevant policies which inform the South African agricultural sector. Now, these frameworks have been analyzed to ascertain whether they directly address female inclusion in the sector or whether they are non-gender specific, in the sense that it makes reference to male and female inclusion alike. Essentially, the analysis of these frameworks and policies lay the foundation for analyzing the more empirical or more quantitative data to identify the trends in female agricultural participation, both at the grassroots level and at a national level. Now, this then takes me to the quantitative element of the study, which employed data from 3 sources. And the first source is data from mobile auctions. And the second one is interviews of cattle sellers at mobile auctions. And just to re-emphasize that these mobile auctions take place in and around the Matatial area, and they are usually hosted by NGOs like the ERS, which is environmental and the name slips my mind now. We'll come back to that later. And then
environmental rural solution.
And rural solutions. Yes, sorry, I was going to say environmental and research solutions. Yeah, thank you, Prof. Environmental and rural solutions. Okay, and then the last data source is agricultural data from the General Household Survey. And we used this data from 2017 up until 2023. So all of those rounds of surveys. So as my colleague Ola mentioned, Matatial is an agrarian community where household food security and livelihoods are closely linked to agricultural activity. And for us, this was a salient characteristic which allowed for the exploration of Matatial to represent a microcosm of South African agrarian communities in general. In terms of the methods of analysis, the legal frameworks and policies were thematically analyzed using keywords and concepts, while for the quantitative data, descriptive analysis was used to analyze both of the data sources from the Matatial auctions, and then bivariate analysis was used to build the trend analysis using the General Household Survey data. And in terms of tests, we conducted a very simple confidence interval test to identify whether the percentage change in male and female agricultural decision makers was statistically significant at the 95% level of confidence. And then lastly, all of the General Household Survey data, or all of the General Household Survey, all of the analysis using the General Household Survey data was weighted. Thank you, Ola. You can move on to the next slide.
This is the next one.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Reesha. So this section will be the analysis of the existing legal framework and policies. Like I said earlier, it is only the relevant ones, the ones that we count relevant, that we decided to analyze. And this is because most of the agricultural policies or enactments, they are not human focused. Some of them are on pest control, some of them are on product standard, some of them are on conservation of agricultural resources and things like that. But the ones that we felt are relevant to be checked with regards to the to women's inclusion in the agricultural sector are the ones that we analyzed. So we'll be looking at the constitutional provisions, the provisions of the Constitution of South Africa, particularly with regards to equality of men and women, which is found in Section 9. Talks about the fact that everyone is equal before the law and they have the right to be recognized. They have the right to equality. Section 27 also deals with non-discrimination when it comes to the issues of participation in society, and also Section 25. These provisions are generally about inclusion, generally about equality and non-discrimination between men and women in South Africa. So we also looked at the development policies. And the particular one that is relevant for this discourse was the National Development Plan, the NDP, and its provision on equality, non-discrimination.
Ola?
Hello?
Sorry, Ola, we have 10 minutes left.
Okay. So we also looked at the equality policies like the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Discrimination Act, the PEPUDA 2000, which in Section 6 prohibits unfair discrimination. We looked at the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment, the BBBEE Act, and its provision on the issue of land rights. We looked at the Land Reform or the Labor Tenants Act. We looked at the Land Reform for Agricultural Development. We looked on the laws on property ownership and inheritance, because these ones were relevant as they had to do with intestates and the Maintenance of Surviving Spouses Act. We looked at the Extension of Security of Tenure Act, the ESTER, and all these were checked with regards to their provision on recognition of the rights of women when it comes to inheritance, especially because it has to do with land, because this is very important for engagement in agriculture. So we looked looking at the analysis of the legal framework and policies, it was seen that most of them are generally worded. Most of them provided, they mentioned the issue of gender. So we realized that they are gender friendly or they are gender inclusive, but we realized that there was no specific mention of women, and there was specifically no enactment or policy that relates to the issue of women's inclusion or women in agriculture in South Africa. And I think we came to the conclusion that overall, although South Africa is doing well in the area of gender inclusion and women inclusion, when it comes to the issue of agriculture, the legal framework and policies are overall not sufficient for the issue on ground. And I think this is because for specific problems, specific solutions are required or recommended. So we looked at the examination of the legal barriers to women's participation in agriculture and cattle farming. And I should say that these legal barriers are also extended to some other societal barriers. For example, when we talk about perception in society, the patriarchy and the way that women are seen or believed to be, the areas of business that they are supposed to generally engage in, these are like cultural things, and they may not really be legal, but since we said law is supposed to control these or actually engage in reform or societal change, these are linked or connected together. So legal framework and policies are usually and generally mentioning gender equality without specificity. There was no woman-specific agricultural legislation or gender policy. There is persistence of patriarchy and cultural perceptions, which continues in society, especially in rural areas. There is lack of awareness generally of the existing legal frameworks and policies. Most people are not aware, they don't know about them. And where you don't know about them, there is no how you can fight for the enforcement. There is what we call gender blind approaches to policy formulation. Most policies are formulated without thinking about, okay, these are the women issues or these are gender issues that are related. And then we have lack of enforcement generally on women's inclusion. Like I said, where there is no awareness or there is no wherewithal for finance, how can there be a fight or advocacy for enforcement? Reesha?
Thank you so much, Ola. I think really just like highlighting the gender blind approaches really paves the way for now understanding what the numbers are telling us. And interestingly, as we will go through the data, we'll see that it's quite different from what we had expected. So I just want to highlight, before I go into the findings, that a key focus of the paper is to identify whether quantitatively there is a significant difference in the gender distribution of individuals who engage in household agricultural activities. And as I had outlined earlier, we used various data sources. And if I can summarize it, the first one was just the data from the Matatial auctions. And then the second one was more specifically household data from the General Household Survey. So to this end, Figure 1 then presents the average number of sellers per year, and in comparison, the average number of female sellers per year who have participated in the mobile auctions which take place across Matatial. And then we can see that the average number of sellers per year is represented by the blue trend line, and the average number of female sellers per year is the orange trend line. And over this 9-year period between 2014 and 2023, it's interesting to note that the average number of sellers are far less than that of the yearly average of all sellers. So that was the blue trend line. And in particular, the number of female sellers does not exceed 20 sellers within a 12-month cycle. You can go to the next slide, Ola. So now to provide more context to these findings from Matatial, because remember Matatial is being used as a microcosm of agrarian communities within the broader South African society. Figure 2 provides a gender breakdown of the main decision maker of agricultural activities in South Africa over a 6-year period from 2017 up until 2023 using the General Household Survey. Now, interestingly, so the orange line represents females and the blue line represents males, right? So interestingly, you can see that nationally there are far more females at a household level who are agricultural decision makers compared to males. And specifically, the results show that, for example, in 2018, 46% of males were agricultural decision makers compared to 52% of females. And then we see this trend continuing where, for example, in 2022, 48% of males compared to 52% of females were agricultural decision makers. Ola, you can move on to the next slide, please. So now just to contextualize these findings a bit, I think overall the results highlight 2 salient points. Firstly, at a national level, females are increasingly becoming role players or key role players in agricultural activity decision making. And remember, this is at a household level. So this means that it's referring to individuals who farm crops, who keep cattle. So it's farming at a household level. And very importantly, we note that this trend is not spilling over at the grassroots level into farming communities like we have seen in Matatial. So we thought that maybe this could be a context-specific issue that's linked to Matatial that requires further research, okay? But then the second salient point, which I want to highlight, is that the percentage change from 2017 to 2023 is not statistically significant for both males and females. So this is the last analysis slide that I showed. Basically, the percentage increase for males from 27 to 2023 was only 4%, and for females it was only 1%. So
2 minutes.
Thanks, Prof. It suggests that in general, over the last 6 years, there has been no significant increase in the share of men and women who make decisions regarding household agriculture. And this is quite interesting, okay? And it could imply that the share of households that engage in agricultural activities have not shared over time. So there isn't any significantly new households that are doing this. And it's probably linked to maybe older household members remaining in farming communities, tending to agricultural practices, whilst younger members migrate to urban areas in search of more formal employment. But overall, these findings have various implications for household agricultural activity, food security, and livelihoods, which, of course, require further attention. Well, I'm going to hand over to you for the last minute, just to wrap up. Thank you.
So, thank you, Reesha. I think the major recommendation is for continuous research to identify the gaps and the challenges that women face with engaging in the agricultural sector. And on the legal aspect, we would recommend legal reform and specific policies like women in agricultural policies, and which would have inbuilt systems for enforcement and practicability. Of course, law alone will not be sufficient for this. We'll also need to engage stakeholders, we need capacity building and things like that. Thank you.
Just
Thank
in
you
time.
very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. To colleagues in the audience online and in the house, just to remind you that you can please continue just writing your comments and questions, and then we will take each one of those. Reesha will assist me online with facilitating questions online, and then then here will assist me in blessing with just facilitating questions in the house. But before we do that, I thought I would act both the player and the referee in this seminar, and I thought it would be nice for us to have a comment or response from the paper itself, from someone who's probably more intimately involved with the research, but for the first time has read the paper. So this is what I've put together as comments for me. The questions that I thought would be important to ask the paper, but this is not an exhaustive list of questions that can be asked. For example, does the paper have a valid research aim in the context? Unfortunately, am I sharing? Sorry.
No, you're not, Prof. I was hoping that you would.
Oh, okay. So I'm sorry about that. Let me share quickly. All right. Does the paper have a valid research aim in the context of South African efforts to empower women in all economic sectors? As it says, it's one of its aims. In terms of approach and methods, does the paper, does the legal framework support it? Sorry, I just need to remove that. Yeah, has the legislative framework supported the policy efforts? And then another question that could be asked, does the paper evaluate the practical implementation of South African policies in achieving the aims? So is the paper looking at this? And I mean, you'll hear that there are discussions around the external environment of cultural, patriarchal, practices or tendencies or social environment that also plays a role in how policies are being implemented, whether or not they have the desired impact intended. And then does the data show if there has been an improvement from policy efforts? Is there a direct link showing that the policies have impacted the status quo positively or negatively? And then lastly, can the improvements be linked to the policy efforts if there are any that can be found? Okay, so you can see that the questions are getting more and more difficult for the paper. So this is what I could find. Let me just make it a bit bigger. Maybe I must actually make it like that. Okay, for the first question, The answer for me is yes to this first question is clearly a yes. The paper has a lot of policy and socioeconomic relevance. It cites numerous adequate legislative efforts with these aims. And it does not only do this in South Africa, but also globally. And those are some of the examples that I could pick up from the paper. So in terms of this question, I thought the paper addressed this adequately. In terms of the second question on approach and methods, whether or not legislative framework supporting the policy efforts. For example, there are examples on how this is done. There's plenty of evidence presented in the study showing that South African legislation has deliberately attempted to address gender inequality generally and in agriculture specifically, especially when it comes to land ownership. And the examples came from studies from PLAS. They looked at the Constitution itself, various legislative tools that were reviewed for this. So this review of relevant policies to me seemed adequate enough for the second question. Third question, does the paper evaluate the practical implementation of South African policies in achieving their aims? The answer for me was yes. Section 5 of the paper is dedicated to examination of legal barriers to women's participation in agriculture and cattle farming. There's the gender analysis from the National Development Plan itself, verdict from own analysis of policy impacts. Little change has been observed. This is from the paper directly on their own evaluation. The evaluation was also very linguistic in terms of looking at the policies. And I thought of this as an internal evaluation of the policies. I thought this was well done. This section, however, I thought from a more systematic evaluation of each relevant chosen policy. And that could be done by looking at the external environment to a greater degree, even if the policies were reaching perfectly themselves. So, for example, when Ola talks about what is the impact of patriarchy on the implementation of the policy, maybe we can think about how can we evaluate whether or not there's been a shift in the environment and whether that shift has enabled a more effective implementation of the policies. And maybe we could look at research methods beyond just looking at quantitative or analyzing the language of the policies or analyzing the trends. The paper, or maybe the next paper will have to think about how that could be done, because it's a more difficult question, I thought. Question 4, does the data show if there has been improvement from policy efforts? The paper goes from national discussions into local cases. I thought that maybe analyzing the national data sets first broadly would be more useful, and then generally going down to the local level, as opposed to presenting the more localized data of the Matatiele region. And I have to say that this is not just Matatiele, but it is the Upper Umzimvubu catchment area. I think there are about 20 villages that are included in this data set. So the town there is just where the ERS, the NGOs that are assisting the communities are situated, but the villages themselves spread out. So I call that the Upper Umzimvubu Matatiele area. But for the paper itself, I thought that maybe start from the analysis of the national data sets before going into so this is just a rearranging of presenting how the data is presented, starting from the more broad to the more specific. So this should not be very difficult to accomplish, because you already are using the general household data survey, which is a national survey. Question 5, even more difficult question: can any of the improvements be linked to the policy efforts? To answer the research question, this is probably the most important and also the most difficult question, I think, for the study. Can we tell if the positive data trends at a national level are associated with specific policies, for example? And also why the trends at national level seem to be different to trends at a local level. So my suggestion here is that maybe we should not use the Matatiel case study as a micro representative of what is happening at a national level. Maybe there are areas that are similar to Matatiel, and then there are areas that are not similar to Matatiel. So the trends at a national level are representing the differences at a geographical level, as well as a socio-economic level from areas that are themselves different. So that could also be the use maybe of getting a very different case study where different trends could be identified. And maybe then in aggregating those sort of like micro case studies, then you come up with a national picture. So that is why the national picture will not necessarily reflect the trends in one particular local area. That could be one way of thinking about this, but also maybe in terms of policy efforts, how they could be linked to impacts observed on the ground. It might be useful to look at breaking points, maybe look at a number of policies that were implemented or enacted with legislation at a particular point in time, and then see if in a few years' time down the line, there are trends that could be associated to those policies at the time. So to try maybe to see if there are any breaking points where suddenly there's big participation of women in agriculture at a national level or at a local level, and then try and go back historically to find out what has happened, whether there's been laws or there's been some other activities, or I don't know. But but by looking at breaking points where the trends suddenly shoot up, you might then think, okay, so what is leading to this shooting up or this break point, whether it's up or it's going down? So, but what would that then that require? I'm suggesting that maybe in the next study, we could look at a systematic thinking's approach, looking at complex theory, because it helps map out systems that are interconnected, where we can look at different variables in terms of how they are affecting one another, but most specifically, how relationships affecting how people are behaving in different, and relationships could also maybe represent best the patriarchal cultures that are taking place in different environments, because mainly those really are about culture, are about how women relate to men. I mean, what Ola presented there was women would send their sons to auctions to sell their cattle. So that highlights a relationship where women in that particular environment are not, taken seriously as sellers themselves, but they know that, men are taken. So that's all about relationships, socio-economic relationships in a particular environment. And systems thinking, really focuses on those types of systems by looking at what relationships exist amongst different genders, age groups, people with power, people in, with economic power, with political power, and how all of those interact. So it could be a suggested way of how maybe the next study could be conducted. Thank you so much. So after that, I would like to invite questions from the audience, and maybe we can start with, I don't know how lonely you are feeling online. Maybe we could start online and then come to, yes.
Like, okay, let me fit myself properly.
Sorry, what did you say? I'm fine, thank you. How are you? Is it possible to
make an appointment with Dave?
You just mind introducing yourself first?
I'm supposed to be preparing for my lecture, and I need to find out if you could give me some guiding or point of what is it that I've been looking at working on something, and I keep thinking, is this what I'm supposed to do, or is this what I think it's supposed to? So maybe having a conversation with someone will give me a better idea of what I need to reflect on.
Okay, can you please
Oh,
write?
so should I
Sorry, you are
okay.
the
Where? Uh-huh. Okay. Now I'll walk into the Hamilton building and ask, where is the dean's? Okay. No, I can
All
come
right,
now.
okay.
I hope I come before the rain, or should I take my umbrella in case? Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
thanks.
All right. Thank you. Reesha, can you please see there online who has got their hand up for Ola and yourself? Or for me, if they, yeah, in my, maybe we can take 2 more questions or comments from you.
Prof, there's no questions online so far.
Okay, so if there are no questions online, I'm going to come to the house. Someone was dying to ask a question in the house. Yes, please go ahead. Yes, just go ahead. Yeah.
So my question is more related to, I think the slide that Dr. Ola had presented, when it touches on the disjunction between the policies that are already implemented and the actual population that they want to impact, right? So my question is, what from a policy standpoint, because we did say we want this policy to also kind of apply to greater economic involvement for women within different economic sectors. What do you think current South African policies have a shortcoming for them to actually have proper impact on the people that they are implemented for, being largely that South Africa is, I would say, a deeply unequal society where we have a lot of impoverished people. So what do you think about some of the shortcomings within our policies in general in terms of implementation of them and having an actual impact or an empirical impact on our population?
Did you catch that, Ola and Reesha?
No, I didn't. I didn't catch the question.
May
Reesha,
I?
did you catch it?
Not fully. I think the connection wasn't very great, Prof. I don't know.
Okay, do you want to come and sit here? So maybe you're closer to the mic. I think what she was trying to ask, I'll just paraphrase and then you please come. And then I'll just paraphrase and then she can add if there's more. What are the hindrances to policies being effective on the ground? In short, that's what you are interested in, South African policies. Is that what you're interested in?
Yes.
Okay. So that's it. Why? So maybe, I don't know, you can think specifically about the policies that you looked at in terms of what you found, or you can answer it broadly. Are you asking for like trends across? Why is it difficult for South African policies specifically to be implemented?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, I mean, I know you looked at these specific policies, but is there like a trend when you're doing linguistics analysis of how the policies are worded, for example, that you thought, maybe this could be a thread moving across all the South African policies. That's what has made these policies difficult to implement. Did you find something like that?
I think I can think of an answer to that. It may not be specific, but I think it's a general, is general for Africans about the way policies are made, which also affects the way it is implemented. Basically, it still boils down to the issue of patriarchy. There are fewer women at the policy making level. And the policies that are made are not tailored specifically to manage the issues of women that comes up. And if this is so, then problems in society that these policies are made to solve, they will not be possible, or they might somehow be restricted in their implementation. So I think that is just one answer that I can think about when it comes to the issue of implementation of policies. Reesha?
Yeah, thank you, Ola. I think just to add, I feel like it's also linked to various other issues like a lack of funding for roadshows on new policies and what the policy means at a very micro level for everyday households. I would say a lack of information sharing at these grassroots level, and also maybe there's also this language barrier because policy is written in English mostly, and then we have various we have communities that speak in various languages, and maybe concepts are not being translated adequately. When there are instances where policy is actually taken down to a micro level. I think another issue could be funding. Just funding the implementation of these policies and programs and interventions doesn't happen. So funding of interventions, for example, training interventions, implementation interventions, because in many cases in South Africa, and I'm sure in many other countries, policy gets written at a very, very macro level, so a level that's very, very disjointed in a way from community, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't appeal or it's not relevant to community, but that transmission of information then doesn't really happen. So I think it's a combination of various issues which then results sadly in the lack of implementation or the lack of change or a lack of intended change. However, in saying that, I think compared to various other countries, South Africa has very, very progressive and very, very progressive policies, but also in some sectors, policies that are very for our citizens. So it's unfortunate that this translation to the people who need the policies for real change is not taking place. Thank you.
Let's give someone else a chance. Is there someone else who's going to comment on that? I mean, hold on. So if you want to comment, anyone else in the room wants to go on in the room? You're going to comment? Yeah. Okay. 1, 2. Just hold on online. We going to take questions in the room first and then go back online, okay? A blessing. Lilita.
Yes. Yeah,
Blessing.
it's no Monday.
Just no Monday. We still in the house. We're going to go back online, okay? We'll come back to you. Blessing, do you want to ask, make a comment?
Yes. So I heard a similar question from her, but since she asked, I mean, like the lady, but then since she has asked that, I'm going to comment that I've seen that you've identified the legislation in South Africa, which is good, and as Prof has also commented, now you need to identify the gaps within those policies, and importantly, to establish whether there are some systemic barriers which are cutting across those policies. Because I heard your answers were mostly like subjective, like you think, which would make a real case, I mean, a good case when you're in your discussion, you would want to find uniform patterns across those policies or regulations. Mm-hmm. And then you argue based on that. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. That's there from a blessing. I just must say though that yeah, so there may be problems within the policies themselves in the way that they've analyzed, the language, how it's presented, etc. But there are also external factors, which are very, very varied, could be. So what Blessing is probably suggesting is that maybe let's look at those patterns internal first, then look at what is in the policies themselves, and then look externally what is sort of like in different maybe contexts that allow or disallow a better implementation or worse implementation of specific policies. So maybe that approach in analyzing sort of more quantitative scientists, would be more useful. Lilith.
So, I wanted to find out when you guys were talking to any of the women, did they bring up like customary laws? Because I know Matadela is mainly rural community, right? So they would often practice cultural norms when it comes to inheritance. So you'll find that the land is inherited by the oldest son. Did they bring up how that might be contributing to why there are less women who are active in agriculture? And also when you guys were looking at the legal framework, do you find that customary laws are in conflict when it comes to women inheriting land, or in any way in conflict with the Constitution? Because you mentioned how the legal framework is quite progressive in the language they use, or just in general, but I know that customary laws tend to favor the cultural norms that South Africans like to practice, specifically in rural areas, and whether that was visible and had any impact at all, or it was more just about whether women are taken seriously at a commercial level, where they're going to like auctions.
So maybe let me just summarize that question if you didn't hear it. Did customary law have any impact or put any barriers in the implementation of the legislation? Or was there a disjuncture between the two, customary law and the sort of like national laws, including the Constitution, that this study looked at? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think I'll just speak about the first part before I hand over to Ola to comment on the perspective, the legal perspective. I remember some of our researchers who conducted the interviews did comment on the woman sharing that there is, of course, the system where the male of the household, where the male is handed over, the household and all the inheritances, whilst the females, in many cases, do a lot of the work, but it's still a male sort of like perceived role. It's a perceived male role to go to the auction and actually negotiate on the price of cattle. So I think there was definitely that dynamic taking place. But Ola, you can comment on the legal perspective, please.
Sorry, I was kicked out. I just managed to re-enter. So I'm
So
not
the
sure.
question, I can repeat the question for Ola. Ola, I think the main the gist of the question was, did this particular study look at how customary law is putting barriers to the implementation of the national legislation, including the Constitution?
We didn't really look at that specifically, but from a general understanding, the South African Constitution accommodates cultural rights and practices, as long as they do not infringe the rights that the basic rights of individuals. So if we are to think deep into it, we would only look at the fact that most of these practices and cultural norms, they are basically from perceptions that are based, that are intertwined already within the societal framework, and that every society is still struggling to come out from, especially in Africa. So it would take more time for laws and policies to be able to break down the barriers of complementing human rights with cultural norms. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense.
Okay, so that's your response from Ola. I mean, you can appreciate that she's thinking on her feet as she's answering you. So maybe you may want to engage her further and then have a better discussion about the laws themselves, because, that's her specialty. All right, fantastic. I'm going to go back online. And I think there was Nomonde, the feminist. Are you able to unmute and speak, Nomonde?
Hi, comrades.
Hi, comrade.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm good. No, thank you for the opportunity that I've been granted. So my name is Nomonde Nkosi. I'm from the organization called Wumandla in Mpumalanga. I'm from an affected community by mining. So I'm so happy to be part of this conversation. I've learned a lot, even though I've joined a little bit later, but it's interesting that each and every day we try to build on how women are affected and how women are neglected by our policies and the society. Firstly, I would like just to say the reason why women are always undermined, it's because of Turkey and our culture and how women should behave in the community. Number two, we've been doing workshops in my community there and there, and women are interested in participating. But the problem is when it comes to support, we can do maybe 2 or 3 workshop in 3 months, then you keep quiet. Then the momentum in these women, like they lose hope again. Then you have to go and start all over again. And that thing of ukuthi bapusheke to know about, when we say what is the constitution, they know you have to start all over again. So I just want to support. I don't know who said that the lack of support of women is the cause also as well on why we are not being recognized as women. Then I want to also go to the civil society and the big NGOs now. When they come to our communities with programs, yes, they give us information. But the problem is sometimes those programs are also led by men. They don't give women enough opportunity to lead. So I think this thing of undermining women, it's all over, not only in the government. How can the government implement the policies while even ourselves, we are failing as the civil society? Another thing is, I'm asking that we as leaders of such organization in the ground, we should be given proper training on how to deal with some of the issues that affect women in our communities. And also, it's important that we also call on government to implement some of these policies, because we here in South Africa we have Department of Women and Youth and what. I don't know what that thing is doing, that department, and I haven't even seen a program that is being done by them. I'm asking that, can we please challenge them to say they must properly empower women at the ground and using organizations that are already existing in the local level. Then lastly, if in the future we can have a chance to challenge the constitution, because I can see that here you have flagged very important questions that might assist that women can be empowered. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, comrade. I just want to say that at the ISER, we are very happy to partner with grassroots-based organization, specifically looking at issues of sustainability. And this is both in terms of environmental sustainability, when you talk about mining, and also socioeconomic sustainability issues. So we'd be happy to hear more from you. I'm going to leave in the comment section our email address, and then we can take a discussion further on what we could do with your particular community and your movement in your area. We'll be very happy to engage with you. Thank you. Dr. Kara and Dr. Ola.
Yes, Prof. No. I just have a comment from online.
Okay, you've got another comment. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, it's a question. Can one conclude that the reasoning behind satisfactory participation at the household level may be due to majority of households being female-headed? And I'll just answer that quickly. I think in part, yes, but also in part, we have to acknowledge various external factors. But I don't think the majority of households are female-headed, but that needs to be double-checked. But I think there's definitely various other reasons that affect the dynamics of household agriculture or gender-based household agriculture. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to take one round. I'm from KZN. One round of questions in the room, and then go back to online. Anyone wants to comment, ask question? Going. Okay, you wanted to follow up. Yes. You can come closer. You can even stand here. That would be perfect.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason why I'm bringing this up is I think we should just touch on something important. I think the General House Survey. So yesterday it actually came up in class during inequality when we were touching on how, because we were looking at quantitative data in terms of like South African inequality. And one of the issues is how we even collect the data from like a knowledge standpoint, right? So the idea of when we label things female-headed households and male-headed households, is that not also problematic in the sense, and doesn't it also misconstrue the type of data that we're collecting? Because, for example, I think the conversation that we had yesterday, or what Prof brought forward to us, that a male-headed household is considered one where a man is present, meaning that even if a woman is also providing just as much as the male that's present, it's still termed as a male-headed household. Unlike a female-headed household, well, it's just the woman who's present, right? So doesn't our quantitative data also then misconstrue our findings, because we technically already understand like where we like collected in the wrong way? I don't want to say the wrong way, but with the wrong understandings. Yeah.
So
Thanks,
there, over to
Tito.
you, Reesha.
Yes, thanks.
That's
It's
your
Tito,
area
right?
of expertise.
Yes, it was Tito. The question came from Tito, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I think such a good question, but I'm not sure about the type of surveys that you guys were looking at in your class in politics yesterday. But I know that the studies collected by Stats South Africa. So a lot of the household surveys, they categorize whether it's a female-headed household or male-headed household, not merely on the presence of a male or the presence of a female. It's based on who is the main decision maker in the household. So, for example, if you came to my household and my husband and I were sitting next to each other, I would say my husband is the main decision maker of the household, not necessarily because he may have more power or because he earns more. I guess it's just the way our households run. But I do understand your concern because I guess it depends on the perspective of roles within various households and also the dynamics between individuals who make decisions. So I think that's definitely something that needs to be debated more on how this then impacts the data that we collect. So very good question.
And I'm very happy for anyone also online who works with data and how data is collected at Stats SA and may want to contribute around these issues on data.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Any more questions? Any more? If we don't have any more questions, we only have 8 minutes to go. So we can maybe have final comments from both you and Ola. If there are no more questions, and then we can close the session.
Okay.
Sorry, before that, Dr. Kara, there was someone who spoke earlier. Sorry, I missed what they were saying. Did you catch any of it? I didn't know whether they were roads.
I didn't catch it fully but from what I understood, the individual is at Rhodes. Maybe I'm an academic at Rhodes who's researching something similar or wants to base a class on something similar and would like to engage with one of us further to gain some ideas or be a soundboard. And then I thought that the individual was coming to our seminar room because they were speaking about rain and an umbrella, but I see no one really entered. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
All right. So it's somebody based here at Rhodes. Fantastic. They know where to find us. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Comments from you and then comments from Dr. Ola. And then, then we will close.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Prof. Before I comment, there is a comment that was posted online from Love More, who said, "Thank you for the interesting research and results." And further, that it is interesting to note that the progress in women involvement in mobile auctions and cattle marketing or decision-making processes in rural South Africa. And then the individual had to leave. I think I will just draw my conclusion from this comment. I think that South Africa has definitely improved in leaps and bounds from where we are to where we currently are in terms of practice and in terms of policy. I definitely think that's not to say that there isn't more work to be done. There's certainly tons more work to be done in empowering, I think, both males and females in the agricultural sector. But specifically, if we're talking about females, just to get their voice out more and also to provide to empower with knowledge, because we know that knowledge is obviously key to various possibilities. So just empower in that way, especially at a grassroots level. So I think although we have made a considerable amount of progress as a country, there's certainly more progress to be made in this particular field of research. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Ola, and then
so thank you, Prof. Thank you, Reesha. I just want to add to what Reesha has said, that we just must keep up on the issue of the discourse of inclusion from policy formulation or to the realization. It is not a matter of legislation alone. It's not just what law alone can do. It has to be all inclusive, all embracing. So we must just keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, colleagues, and thanks to everyone who attended this afternoon. Please follow us, Rhodes at ICR or ICR at Rhodes or Rhodes ISER. Anyway, please find our Facebook pages. We've got, no, it's not Twitter anymore. Listen, I belong to the last century. We've got LinkedIn, we've got X, we are on, did I say YouTube? We are also on YouTube, and by the way, we post all our seminars on YouTube so that you can follow and you can ask questions further there, and we could continue.
I can't see anything again.
Oh, he just got disconnected, I think. Sorry, Prof. All right, apologies, ladies and gentlemen.
Just
Yes,
kicked off there and we were just shutting down. Thank you so much, Mzu, for taking over.
Please,
yes, thank you everyone, and thank you all for coming.
All right, thank you very much, Prof.
Mzu?
I was just going to say, Prof, since you were cut off, you can just repeat your last sentence.
Okay, so last sentence, I said we are online, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, us, and make comments. And we will be posting all our seminars on YouTube and links on all our, so the discussion doesn't end here. And our next seminar is probably going to be around the youth issues in June. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.